All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be taking a deep dive into Week 3 of the college football season. Really isn't much on this slate. Not a game really worth previewing and dissecting individually. So we're just going to take a look at the entire slots here. We got noon, 3:30, and then, of course, the Night Cap as well. Timestamps will be below on specific games if you'd like to skip around. What do you make of this slate, Nick? Obviously, we're about to talk about it here, but this is just a pretty boring slate here for college football, but there's a great one in Week 4 following it. This is just a little primer here to get us geared up for the end of September.
This is really a poor slate when you think about it. Week 3, you would really hope that some of these games would be getting a lot better here. This is a very weak slate. There are some interesting games we're going to highlight. Obviously, that's why we're doing this video. Some top 10 teams, some top 15 teams will get some nice matchups, some good tests. But obviously, this is just a primer for Week 4, which will be a pretty good way to kick off a lot of conference matchups and a lot of good battles in Week 4.
Looking at the first game, a Big Ten contest. Illinois hosts Penn State. The Fighting Illini, they've been flat out disappointing for me. This is a team I picked to win 9 games. Throw some money on the over 6.5 wins for them. Toledo, they were able to fend them off in that one, the Rockets, and then they went on the road to Kansas. And, following the defensive effort in Week 1, figured they were in for a bad, disappointing game in Week 2 on a Friday night in Lawrence, and they were just awful. 533.9 yards allowed, 7.3 yards per play. The balance absolutely tore them up. 277 passing, 262 rushing. And it's weird. Obviously, they lost a handful of DBs last year, the biggest one being probably Sidney Brown, just because of what he meant to this run defense, at least when you look at what's going on this season. They lose DBs, Nick, and somehow the front seven who gets most of their pieces back, like Keith Randolph and Jerzon Newton, they've seemed to regress up front. Tyreek Barnes, a senior linebacker as well. But for the most part, I thought they'd be better up front and when it comes to slowing down the run. But somehow them losing guys in the secondary has allowed them to be bad in the trenches. It doesn't make a lot of sense here. Brett Bielema's doing a very poor job early on in the season. Aaron Henry, defensive coordinator, I expect big things out of him. He's got to get it in high gear if they want to beat Penn State here. This is a team looking for the playoffs this season. A lot of people think they can get it done. I think they have a pretty admirable matchup with the talent they have against Penn State's offensive line. How do you see this one potentially playing out?
Very poor start to the season for Illinois. They really should have come out and beat Kansas on the road. I know it was a tough matchup on a Friday night, and Kansas did have a great crowd. Respect, to the Jayhawks. They brought the fans, but they looked weak against Toledo as well. Illinois has really kind of limped out of the gate here. Meanwhile, Penn State has been hit the gas early on. It was a little bit closer against West Virginia than you would hope, and at times looked a little shaky against Delaware, but overall, Penn State is exactly who we thought they were. They're a very good team. Drew Allure has taken over this offense. It's just got the total keys to it. He's going to try and pick apart this defense that Illinois has been very poor. I also think that Illinois has a nightmare matchup here against the Penn State offensive line and a great running back room that has a lot of talented pieces who can really hit you on multiple different ways with this Penn State running back room. So much good balance there with them. Allen leading the way, 29 carries, 154 yards, and 1 score for him so far. So I think this is going to be a Penn State, blowout here. The line right now is 14 points, so it's a very interesting line. On the road, this could be a big way for Penn State to kind of put their name out there and continue to build off their reputation. They want to win the Big Ten this year, and they certainly have put a good start to it, while meanwhile, Illinois seems to be floundering and falling apart over there.
Well, also Chase Brown's also been big for this running game. They are averaging almost 5 yards per carry, which isn't bad, but they just haven't established any consistency. Only 35 attempts against Toledo, 28 against Kansas, and Altmaier. And the opener was their leading rusher. Who's done a pretty good job for them at quarterback. I think they're talented at receiver with Brian, Isaiah Williams, Washington as well. 3 touchdowns, 3 picks, though, for Altmaier, kind of fighting for his life out there. Had 2 picks against Kansas. He's completing almost 69% of his passes, but again, I think this is a really talented receiving core of Williams, Washington, and Bryant. And then Griffin Moore had some great catches as well against Kansas. This offensive line, I think, is plenty capable, led by Isaiah Adams. 14-point line in favor of Penn State, Nick. Everyone coming in this game, they're going to pick a complete blowout in favor of the Nittany Lions. This team's really struggling to slow down the run, giving up a lot of yards in space. Singleton, Allen, these guys are expected to feast, right? But guess what? This is college football. Upsets happen when you don't expect them. Illinois did that in the past to this football team. I think this is going to be a much closer game than anticipated because, again, that's just how it works out, Nick. Everyone expects a team to get blown out. Going on the road, though, in the Big Ten is still going to be incredibly tough. This is going to be a very shocking result, I think, at the end because this is really going to come down to the wire. Could be completely wrong, but again, I think this is a good Illinois football team. They just need to play better, and I think this is where it's going to start for them with conference play beginning here for Illinois at home.
I see a big win here for Penn State. I disagree with you there a little bit. I just think Penn State has too much talent. Yeah, it is any given Saturday, so certainly if I'm going to be wrong, it's certainly possible. I could be wrong here. I just think that Penn State's so talented. Illinois seems to be just in panic mode over there in Champaign, and it's really definitely a shame because this is a team you and I were both high on in the offseason. The defense has just not lived up to expectations.
Some other notable games to kick off our college football Saturday. Florida State going on the road to Boston College, who has just looked completely awful in the first 2 weeks of the season. We picked them to win 7 games, I believe it was, because of how easy the schedule was, and they're not even taking advantage of that. Struggled against Holy Cross, barely beat them. Lost to NIU. Florida State's expected to run it up here, and obviously maybe you could say the same thing for what I just said. Penn State traveling to Illinois, Florida State conference opener on the road at Boston College, but that's not going to be the case here, Nick. This one's actually going to be a blowout.
This is definitely two different schools. Boston College is a totally different beast than Illinois in terms of just poor attendance. I don't expect a whole lot of fans there at Alumni Stadium on Saturday. I think that this Florida State team is going to absolutely come in here and blitz this Boston College team that has been terrible. They could have lost that game to Holy Cross. It wasn't for a fumble on the final drive in the red zone. The Holy Cross quarterback had a really good day, fumbled the ball. If he hadn't fumbled the ball there, Holy Cross could have certainly tied the game and gone to overtime, potentially won it. Boston College is in free fall mode right now. Jeff Hafley is certainly got to be worried about his seat getting very, very hot up there in Boston, Massachusetts. Florida State's going to blitz them with this one, 26. I'm certainly taking Florida State with the points here.
Yeah, I certainly think that Boston College is a little bit better than people think on the defensive line, but they didn't prove it last week. Gave up 264 to an FCS school. Offensive line's one of the nation's worst. Christian Mahogany, though, the scouts at least will be watching him. So something to watch at the end of the day, every single game. Boston College, though, they're going to have to lean on their veterans at linebacker and Cam Arnold, Vinny DePalma to slow down this balanced attack of Florida State. I don't expect this one to be close at all. I expect the points to cover as well for Florida State. But again, it is college football. But I'm not going to play that card on this one. I think it's certainly going to be a beatdown. LSU and Mississippi State, the conference opener here. Starkville hosting the Tigers, who are looking to get back on track after that loss to Florida State. Jaden Daniels put on a clinic last week. I think they played Grambling, and he was just on fire. It was a very upset football team, clearly, as they were not holding back one bit. They ran up the scoreboard 72-10. He had 5 touchdowns. I think that was in the first half as well. 269 yards passing. Mississippi State, this new look offense led by Jaquavius Marks at running back. I think it's certainly an interesting one. They did a pretty solid job against Arizona. The veterans they have on defense, though, Nathaniel Watson and Jet Johnson, guys like Sean Preston at safety, DeMonte Russell at defensive end. There's certainly a lot of playmakers on this defense that can make things hard for LSU, especially Jaden Crometti at defensive tackle. Senior-led defense for the most part here for Mississippi State, Nick. What do you expect from LSU, though, in response to what the Bulldogs are putting on the field?
Jaden Daniels' first 5 touchdowns in the first half was only the 3rd time in LSU history that happened. The other quarterback to do that, Joe Burrow, did it twice, once against a token opposition and also against Oklahoma in the playoff. We all remember that. Mississippi State, this team is 2-0, but it's a very ugly 2-0. Escaped against Arizona at home last week, overtime game. There was a controversial no call at the end of the game. The Arizona quarterback had 4 interceptions. A game that State should have put away with very much ease. They also didn't look great against Southeastern Louisiana week 1. Certainly a lot of question marks for the Bulldogs. LSU, they have a lot of question marks themselves. This is their first real test since playing Florida State. I don't count Grambling as a real test here. They go into Starkville. It's a tough environment at times there. The cowbells can be loud. Nice, passionate fan base. I think LSU wins this one with ease. I do like what Mississippi State is doing, even though I do say they are a week 2-0. I think they do have a solid defense that does, obviously, 4 interceptions against Arizona, so they do get after the ball. Nice ball hawking defense. And Jaquez Marks is a very good running back, 250 yards on the ground, 3 scores on 43 carries for him so far. I think Jaden Daniels and co. really come in here and dominate at Davis Wade Stadium. The line's 10 points right now. They should cover that pretty easily. I'm taking LSU in the points here. Very interesting matchup to kick off SEC play, at noon. We can get a good look at these two teams to see what's going on.
Yeah, I'm going to take Mississippi State to cover. LSU will win. Will Rogers, a veteran quarterback, he's got, familiarity with this receiving room. And, the corners did not look good one bit against Florida State. Obviously, much different team, much more talented receivers, but still, they're plenty deep here for Mississippi State. Justin Robinson, Creed Whitmore, some of the younger guys getting involved. The Dietrich Griffin, the senior, he has 9 grabs for them. Jaquavius Marks is actually their 2nd leading pass catcher. So we'll see if they can really start to spread it around, because I think they're certainly capable of getting guys like Jaden Wally involved. I think they're going to cover those just because the LSU secondary was just not very good a couple weeks ago. And this is not the air raid by any means, because they have switched schemes. I think that could certainly lead to some troubles. But I think Mississippi State's going to cover in this game, Nick. Final thoughts on that potentially happening, or do you think the Bulldogs will just absolutely get blown out?
I think the Bulldogs will get blown out, but certainly if there is going to be a backdoor cover somewhere on this list in the early slate, I certainly think it's going to be in Starkville. Mississippi State does have a really talented, they do fight hard. There's a team that doesn't roll over and die. They have nice veteran leadership on the defense. They could certainly give Jaden Daniels some tough looks early on.
Looking at Kansas State, Missouri, a very underrated game on SEC Network. Wildcats defending Big 12 champions. They're going to go on the road here to play Missouri. Very interesting game here. They completely gut punched a very good Troy football team the other day. And, Walker or Will Howard, that is, he's been on fire so far. 5 touchdowns, 547 yards, really starting to pick up the pace here for this offense. It's certainly going to have to lean on the passing game a little bit more. RJ Garcia, he's emerged as a playmaker for them as their leading pass catcher. Phillip Brooks, plenty of speed next to him. And Jaden Jackson as well, 6 grabs, 115 yards. And then Ben Sinnott, the tight end for them that has 100-plus yards this season. They already have 4 guys over 100 yards. And then Keegan Johnson, not sure what his status is, but this is certainly a guy they want to continue to push onto the field after transferring in from Iowa. The running game led by DJ Giddens and Treshaun Ward. It's been a 1-2 punch. Both of those guys have exactly 27 attempts. Ward's been disappointing, though, only 114 yards in 1 score this season. I thought he'd be a great replacement for Deuce Vaughn in terms of speed and being able to make plays on the edge. And that's just not been the case for them, Nick. They're looking to get things going against a very good Missouri defense that has improved heavily over the years here. I think Missouri's probably going to win this game, and I'm going to take them outright to cover and win this game as the underdog here. I just think it's time for them. They need to get the signature win here for this tenure to continue. I think some of the veterans they have up front and in the secondary, guys like Chris Abrams-Journay, Dylan Carnell, these guys are going to be stepping up for them. Joseph Charleston, Darius Robinson. And we've yet to see this linebacking core really kick into gear, led by Tyrone Hopper. I think Missouri's going to win this game, Nick. I think they're going to be able to run the ball. I think they're going to make some pass plays through the air, led by Luther Burden. They do need to get more guys involved, though, because Nathaniel Pete is their second leading pass catcher. The next best in terms of receptions is 4. Burden has 15, so they're feeding him the rock like we anticipated, like we said they needed to do, or he was probably going to transfer out. I think Brady Cook, this is his time to shine, and they're going to win this game in an upset fashion.
If there's going to be a statement win for the Missouri Tigers, it's got to be here hosting Kansas State. A very good Kansas State, like you said, absolutely gut punch Troy, who's a very good Troy team. They're a very talented Trojan team. They return a lot of talent on defense. Will Howard, I've been very impressed so far over the season. 547 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions for him. Cook has looked pretty good as well. 31 of 40 for Cook, 376 and 3 touchdowns. Pretty good numbers. Luther Burden, I said he was going to have a breakout year. I said he had to have a breakout year. So far, he's looking pretty good. 15 receptions, 213 yards, and a score for him. This is a very interesting matchup in Missouri. A bit of an old rivalry matchup from the Big 12 days. I like this a lot. I think that these are 2 good teams who have something to prove in their conference. Kansas State won their conference last year. Missouri looking to take that next step under Eli Drinkwitz. I think Missouri can win this game. I'm going to take Kansas State here and be a little more cautious, but I do think Missouri can win this game. I think the key to success there is feed Luther Burden early and often and find a way to get Cook comfortable in the pocket and don't make any mistakes where you throw into tough areas. I think Missouri has all the tools to win this game. I'm going to be cautiously optimistic here and take Kansas State. I don't know if they'll cover, but 5 is a bit of a low line here. I like this game a lot. This is definitely the best game in the early slate for me. I'll be watching this one on SEC Network. I'm very excited for this matchup. These are 2 very interesting teams heading in 2 very interesting directions.
Kansas State's only allowed 76 rushing yards so far this season. Austin Moore has been phenomenal. Linebacker, veteran of DN Khaled Duke. Those are 2 guys you expected them to lead on this year, and they're already being highly productive. I think Missouri is going to be hard for them to run the ball. I certainly think they're going to have adequate enough balance to put up enough points in what's going to be a defensive affair. So I'm going to take a low-scoring game here in Missouri. I think the Tigers are going to win outright, though. Very interested way to get our season started in conference for a lot of those teams we just said above. Indiana hosting Louisville, Lucas Oil Stadium. That's pretty interesting. Georgia Southern looking to pull off another upset over a Big Ten team on the road at Wisconsin. Wake Forest and Old Dominion. Not much really else going on here at noon, but I definitely think the game's above, featuring 4 ranked teams. Going to be the best part of this week 3, Nick.
I like the Louisville game at Lucas Oil Stadium in a dome. We're still trying to see if this air raid offense from Louisville can really take off. Jack Plummer, for his part, nearly 500 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, though. We really want to see this offense kind of unleash for the Cardinals. They have 2 wins so far, but they come from behind to beat Georgia Tech in Atlanta. They took care of Murray State with ease in their home opener on Thursday earlier in this last week. So this team's a good team. I want to see what they can do. Also, Wisconsin, they just got a tough loss against Washington State. How do they come back here and beat Georgia Southern at home and get the energy back at Camp Randall?
Looking at the mid-afternoon slate, Notre Dame hosting Central Michigan on Peacock. Obviously, they'll host Ohio State in 2 weeks. Don't want to get caught sleepwalking here, and I don't think they will. If you see them kind of struggle a little bit, don't be shocked. I think that will be certainly why. South Carolina and Georgia, SEC opener on CBS, 3:30 Eastern Time from Athens. South Carolina got annihilated up front by North Carolina. A talented Tar Heel defensive line, Nick, but they're going against the defensive line that's known for being the most physical, nasty guys in college football after having 9 sacks. What are they going to do here to win this game? They got to keep Spencer Rattler upright. And at first glance, you say that's not going to be possible at all. I don't think it is one, but even though you see crazy week-to-week improvements in college football, think they're certainly going to look to expose the Georgia secondary that at times, certainly we've talked about before, gives up a lot of plays downfield. Rattler's just not going to have enough time. They're going to get completely annihilated up front. I think this is going to be a complete blowout. I'm thinking like 45-3, something like that, kind of like it was last year. Remember last preseason, we had South Carolina beating Georgia. Quickly switched that pick because they were very disappointing to start the year. Same thing goes for 2023 for the Gamecock squad.
I think Notre Dame will beat Central Michigan. That's an interesting matchup on Peacock. I like Sam Hartman to keep throwing it out. 34.5 is the line in that game. Notre Dame should cover that. I like them with the points there. Georgia, 27.5 is their line. They should cover that with ease against South Carolina. Very disappointing. Obviously, South Carolina disappointed me last year. I had high hopes for them. What the South Carolina was at the second half of the season last year is what I thought they'd be all year. They've been just flat out disappointing so far this season. They struggled in there against their lower opposition. I believe it was Furman they played this past week, and they struggled against that opposition. And obviously, they lost to North Carolina. Absolute jailbreak up against the Tar Heels. I mean, jailbreak up front. They got in there and just so many tackles for loss, so many sacks. Rattler got his head knocked off. Kind of looked like Daniel Jones for the Giants in that Sunday night game. Just totally get knocked around. There's two good comparisons there. Tough comparisons, certainly for someone like me who's a Giants fan and also like South Carolina Gamecocks. I think Georgia steamrolls them here. Their first real opposition so far this season. They really have not played anybody of note. They played Ball State. They played UT Martin, I think it was week 1. So this is their first chance to get a real opportunity here for Georgia. Still not really meaning a whole lot for me. This Georgia team just has such a sleepwalk of a schedule. It's a kind of a joke of a schedule. What will they do on CBS? They'll be on national television for the first time. What are they going to look like? What are they going to come out with on defense? How is Carson Beck going to continue to adjust playing against a better defense for the first time?
San Diego State travels to Oregon State. A lot of points here on the Beavers, who've looked very good under DJ Uiagalelei in their first 2 games. 24.5 is the line in favor of OSU. I think this is a little hefty because San Diego State, they're known to play teams very tough. Lost by 25 last week, though. UCLA, I mean, that's pretty on par. A second 25-point loss, though, definitely doesn't seem ideal for this type of program. It certainly plays with a lot of pride. They're very tough, too. They got guys on defense like Cooper McDonald, Garrett Fountain, certainly play with a lot of oomph in their step. It's going to be hard, though, for San Diego State to win this game because Jaden Maiden, not the greatest of passers for them. This running attack is led by him, though, 184 yards and 2 touchdowns, so maybe they can expose them with some versatility there. But for the most part, they just really struggle to run the ball. I think in terms of toughness, they'll be more than willing to go toe-to-toe with Oregon State, but I think in the end, the Beavers will pull it out. I think they're going to look to throw over a secondary. It's typically been very good, and so far this season, they haven't been all that good. They give them 322 passing yards to Idaho State, almost 300 UCLA, and Ohio, led mainly by a backup quarterback, also almost eclipsed that 300-yard mark. So I think this is going to be a tough day for San Diego State. Do you think the Aztecs will cover in this one?
I think it's going to be an interesting game. I think Oregon State will blow them out. I think Oregon State's got all the right momentum so far this season. DJ has looked fantastic at quarterback for them. He's really been a good spot. Martinez as well in the rock for them. 25 carries, 250 yards, and a score for him. I like Oregon State a lot here. I think they cover the points as well. This is a very exciting team. This Beavers team is really kicking up the high gear, and they're looking really good so far.
Minnesota and North Carolina, Drake May had to lead his team to a heroic win over Appalachian State. Those 2 games in that series last couple seasons have been absolutely insane. But the defense continues to let North Carolina down after a big week 1. I was excited how their defensive line performed. They turned around and they weren't all that good. Went from 16 TFL to only 4 against Appalachian State. They are favored by more than 2 touchdowns in that one. And, this defense, I think, certainly is in for a bad matchup, even though, again, I like the talent on the defensive line. You have 219 rushing in App State, 275 passing. The defense just did not look good. In Minnesota, they're looking to get on track. This is a talented receiving core for them. Of course, they're pretty one-dimensional because the quarterback play, Kyle Kamanis, he's not all that great. He's only completed about 57% in his first 2 games. He only had 117 against Eastern Michigan this past week. I mean, this is kind of looking like an Iowa-like offense for Minnesota, which is pretty embarrassing because I think they have the personnel at pass catcher. Sean Tyler, a capable running back. Darius Taylor, a freshman, has really emerged for them. And then, this is a good, led by Nathan Bowe, a good offensive line. They have some nice size as well. They're just not performing very well. Quinn Carroll as well, guys, 6'7", 315. I think this is a good matchup for Minnesota, considering what they have on offense. North Carolina, I don't think they're going to be as physical, but I think Drake May at the end of the day is going to be the difference maker against a great Minnesota defense. I think we're going to see a lower scoring contest in this one. The total is at 49, 7.5 in favor of the Tar Heels. I think Minnesota will cover in a lower scoring game, though, Nick. Very excited for this one, though. There's going to be a lot of guys playing on Sundays on this game. Marion Hampton as well last week was a big-time player for them, had 200-plus rushing, a couple of touchdowns. How do you see this one playing out? Because I certainly think we could see an upset here in Chapel Hill.
Certainly is an interesting matchup. Minnesota's an ugly 2-0 in my opinion. They had to walk it off against Nebraska, which Nebraska is a very terrible team. We saw against them Colorado this past week. Also played a weaker opposition this week. Drake May's been playing really well, but you want to see more of him. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, just under 500 yards. You need to see more of Drake May. I think he's continuing to hit his stride. Omari Hampton as well, playing decently at the back, 42 carries, 271 yards, 5 scores. Obviously, having no Tez Walker has been an issue for North Carolina. He will not play this season, and what is a joke of a decision by the NCAA. So that's something to keep in mind here. I like North Carolina here. I think they will cover the points, 7.5. I think the under 49 is certainly something to look at if you're going to be try to take an under this week. I think 49 is a very safe bet for this under. These two defenses will both smother each other. Minnesota is really lacking that pulse on offense, very one-dimensional. This is a fun out-of-conference matchup at Chapel Hill. I like this a lot. Going to be watching this game around 3:30. I think it's a good, nice, fun matchup.
Yeah, this was a great secondary led by Justin Whaley and the nation's top safety, Tyler Nubbin, going against the receiving room that has had J.J. Jones and Kobe Paysour emerge. You kind of wondered who would do that. This is an incredibly deep receiving room for North Carolina. Even though Walker's not playing, they're starting to have plenty of guys they can feed. So, yeah, lower scoring game for me. Minnesota will cover. North Carolina, see them win by just a handful of points. It's going to be a very exciting matchup for them there. And then cap off 3:30. Alabama goes on the road against South Florida. That's going to be the ABC feature. Interested to see how Alabama bounces back after a pretty crushing, brutal loss against Texas, where the offense really lacked a passing attack for the most part. Jalen Miller has a lot to improve on. It's probably not going to show that in this game against South Florida. Mine Brown, though, for USF at quarterback. Alex Golesh, of course, the former Tennessee offensive coordinator. He's over here running this offense for them. They're showcasing some good speed, and they're showcasing a lot of yards as well on the ground. So I'm very interested to see if they can try to beat up on a wounded rushing defense. Well, I mean, the rushing defense was good, but overall the defense has certainly struggled at the back end, that is. So I think Naquan Wright, Bynum Brown, you're going to see these guys get plenty of touches. We'll see how physical Alabama is, though, and how excited they are for this game.
This is a very interesting trip. Nick Saban and Alabama do not go on non-conference true road games. They really just have not. This is the 4th non-conference true road game at USF this weekend. Last year, of course, they traveled to Texas. That was a very new first, non-conference thing for them. They played Penn State on the road in 2011, and they also played Duke on the road in 2010. But you're right, they're 4 non-conference true road games. Nick Saban and co. do not really schedule these. I think it's a very interesting matchup. I'm very excited for this as an Alabama fan. Obviously, the letdown, losing to Texas, was brutal, right? Texas won that game. They earned that win. Props to them. Travel to South Florida, play at Raymond James Stadium. Should have a pretty good pro-Bama crowd. A lot of Bama alums settle in Tampa, so I'm expecting a nice pro-Bama crowd here. 3:30 ABC, I like this slot here. Alabama's got to get back. We need to see more of Jalen Monroe. Been terrible in the pass game. I'm certainly concerned about this Alabama passing game. They need to step up here and see what they can do against this USF defense that isn't very good, but isn't very bad. Just a middle-of-the-road team here. They got to get some points early and got to put up a ton of points in this game.
Yeah, that passing defense last year for USF was just awful. We'll see what kind of improvements they can show in this one, though. Should certainly be a blowout in favor of the Tide. Looking at some other mid-afternoon games, Rutgers, Virginia Tech. That's an interesting one as well. 3:30 on Big Ten Network. Western Kentucky going down the road against Ohio State. Looking at that offense on track after a sluggish first 2 weeks under Kyle McCord, who's really starting to get a good grasp of this offense, though. I think they're going to give him the full go in this game. Western Kentucky, of course, Austin Reed, Malachi Corley, high-flying passing attack. And then at 5 o'clock Eastern time on Peacock, Washington playing at Michigan State. No Mel Tucker for the Spartans. Michael Penix against the secondary. I think he's going to have 500 yards easily. They've just been so sluggish against the last 2 years. And guess what? Now they have a big distraction in front of them. I think Penix is just going to have a Heisman-like performance in this one. 500 yards, 6 touchdowns. How do you see this one playing out, Nick? And what other games to catch your eye here on the mid-afternoon slate that we didn't give any love to?
I like Rutgers to play well against Virginia Tech. I think they win that game. The line right now is 6.5. It's a very interesting way to look at that. The Washington-Michigan State game had a lot of hype going into the season, had a lot of hype in the past, but now Michigan State's really, and despite being 2-0, they're in a tough spot. Obviously, the Mel Tucker situation, total crazy case up there in Michigan State. It's very interesting with the whole buyout, everything that's kind of complicated with that legal thing, the whole sort of legal ramifications of all of this for Michigan State. A ton of distractions at Spartan Stadium. I really wonder what the attendance is going to be like. I don't know if the fans are going to show out. I expect Washington to absolutely dominate, definitely taking the points with them there. Should be an easy pick for you if you're looking to make some betting moves. Northwestern Duke's an interesting matchup at 3:30. In Durham, Duke 18.5-point favorites. Riley Leonard wants to continue to improve and look better. Duke looked a little shaky at times against their token opposition after beating Clemson 2 weeks ago. Ohio State, Western Kentucky is an interesting matchup at Ohio Stadium. Can this offense for Ohio State finally start to hit that gear? We saw a little bit more against Youngstown State, but they got Notre Dame coming up very soon. They need to find a way to kick it in gear. Notre Dame has definitely an opportunity to outscore them in that matchup. That's a game we'll be certainly keep my eyes on.
Looking at the best game probably on the slate. That's probably going to be Florida hosting Tennessee. Obviously, the Gators are looking to get back on track after, a sluggish game against Utah where, they had a lot of mistakes, false starts on third down. We're going to Mertz, I think he did what he could. For the most part, though, Mertz, he can't be playing from behind. But, we said the same thing last year about Anthony Richardson going into this game. And he ended up lighting it up, like 430 passing yards, numerous touchdowns. He was absolutely flaming them. Got back on track last week, 193, completed 82% of his passes against McNeese State. And I think this is going to be a closer game than people expect. Tennessee, they haven't looked exactly the greatest on offense so far this year. Joe Milton still trying to find his footing, still kind of struggling with some, mechanics and whatnot, accuracy, completing 67% of his passes, exactly 21 completions and 2 touchdowns in his first 2 games. They only put up 30 on Austin PA. That's certainly not great. That's not what they want to do. Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, this is going to be an interesting rushing attack, though. This is a 1-2 punch. Dylan Sampson, though, is the only one that's found the end zone. He's got 4 scores this year. So they have 3 guys they're looking to keep this Florida defense off balance, led by Desmond Watson, a big guy in the middle. Jamari Lyons has stepped up front. Shamark James, that linebacker, he's going to have to be a big force in this one. And Princely, UNMLN off the edge. These are guys that are going to have to perform very well in this game, as will, Jason Marshall. This is a guy that certainly we're waiting to break out in this for the Florida Gators secondary. Jaden Hill. These guys are game names you're going to hear called very often, Nick, because they're going to have to be tasked with slowing down a lot of speed from Tennessee. And I think Florida's going to look to slow this game down, though, because they don't have the greatest of quarterbacks. Ricky Pearsall's going to get a lot of targets. Eugene Watson, Izon Mitchell, Mizell, that is. These guys have plenty of speed. Caleb Douglas as well. They're going to look to expose them against the Tennessee secondary. They was known for giving up a lot of yards last year. But I think the most important thing is this running game, led by Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne, an offensive line that, again, they were very bad against Utah. They're looking to make a name for themselves in front of this home crowd. I think the Gators are going to beat Tennessee, Nick. I know that's crazy, but I think this offensive line, they're going to get back on track. And I think some of the struggles for Tennessee, they're going to be a little off balance against the Gator defense that's going to be playing behind this home crowd with a lot of energy.
Wow, that's certainly a bold take. I don't think I'm going to go that far, but there is something to be said about the Florida crowd and the energy there. It's a tough place to play in the Swamp. And let's be real, Tennessee has not looked incredible so far. They played Virginia and Austin, PA, and they really did not look great against either of those teams. I know that the scores were lofty in the end, but they were slow starts. This offense under Joe Milton is still not fully clicking. Jabari Wright looks good on the ground, but overall, they're really not clicking at full speed right now. I'm a little concerned about this Tennessee offense in the future. I think they do win this game, but Milton right now, 42 of 63, 429 and 4 touchdowns. Keaton, 8 receptions, 118 yards, 1 touchdown. It's going to be hot in Gainesville, those September games. I've been to a September game in Gainesville. It's very hot, swamp-like atmosphere, very tough, certainly tough to deal with. The line's 6.5, so obviously, the bookies think this is going to be a close matchup, and I certainly do agree with them. I think this will be a close matchup. It will come down to the wire. I'll take Tennessee to win this one in the 4th quarter. But if I'm a Tennessee fan, I certainly should start to get a little concerned here with what I've seen early on. This Tennessee team has struggled. They don't look like a top 10, top 15 team to me. They really seem to be struggling, not really find their way to click. And they got tough matchups coming up with Georgia in the future looming on the horizon. They got to figure this out very soon if they want to be contenders in the SEC East.
And I was kind of jumping around a little bit, so I'll give some more clarity here on that prediction. Aaron Beasley, Tyler Barron, Omari Thomas, a very good front seven that was solid against the run last year. But I think the Gators, led by Austin Barber, Richie Leonard, Micah Muzaka up front, with that running back duo, the speed, they have a wide receiver I think is going to be able to cook off play action. I think they're going to come into this game looking on the ground to pound the football, and I think they're going to want to. I think they're angry. They're upset with how they played against Utah, and this is a perfect game to make everyone forget about what happened August 31st against the Utes. So I think the Gators are going to go out here and they're going to win this one. Joe Milton, I think some of his accuracy and whatnot certainly might plague them. I certainly think he'll have some good numbers in this game. But again, I'm going to take the Gators to win this game, Nick. It seems like a perfect spot to pick Florida. Final thoughts on that one, and overall, what do you think the final score will be? Will the Gators at least cover in this one?
I think the Gators can cover. I think Tennessee could win it by a field goal late in the game. Like I said, I think it's going to come down to the wire. Tennessee might win by a touchdown late in the game. It could be a 5-point win here. I think I'm certainly leaning towards Florida covering. It's a very interesting matchup. Florida's not as bad as maybe we thought they were. They looked really bad against Utah, but I think they're starting to steady and right the ship here. This defense is very good. They have some nice hard-hitting players, and Tennessee has not looked great on offense. This is a very intriguing matchup. Certainly got to keep your eye on it. A couple weeks ago, I would have said this matchup didn't really mean a whole lot, but now it has a little bit more meaning to me since both teams have looked very different than we thought they might look at the start of the season.
And the rest of the nightcap, it's pretty pitiful to be quite frankly honest with you. UNLV hosting Vanderbilt, only 4-point favorites there for the Doors. NIU, if they can pull out an upset over Nebraska, it's going to make the whole entire country laugh. Oklahoma State, they're looking to figure things out at quarterback here. Gundy really has his hands full. 2 or 3 different guys are really in the running for that one. Georgia Tech, 20-point dogs going on the road to Ole Miss and Oxford. It's going to be interesting to see if they can continue to play with the same offense they did week 1 against Louisville, where in that second quarter they put up 20-plus points. They're able to have nice balance. Haynes King certainly looking for, a vengeance here against the SEC opponent. BYU and Arkansas, maybe something there. Not really that notable with KJ Jefferson. Raheem Sanders, some pretty high-end talent there that you can watch for the Hogs on ESPN2 against BYU, led by Keaton Slovis and some very talented receivers. On ABC, though, this game's probably not going to mean much at the end of the year. Pittsburgh at West Virginia, though, backyard brawl. There's going to be some fireworks on this one. Pittsburgh, they got kind of embarrassed last week at home against Cincinnati. And they were pretty good against the pass, gave up a couple big runs. That was really the difference maker for them. The offense was awful. Djokovic completed only like 40%, didn't have many receptions to go around, couldn't run the ball. The offense was just flat out disappointing against the Cincinnati defense. That is actually pretty solid, but again, I think they should certainly been able to win. TCU at Houston, the Cougars are looking a little bit better now over the first couple of weeks than people expected. Horned Frogs looking to get back on track with Chandler Morris and a talented group of receivers. That defense still has a sour taste in their mouth after the Colorado game. And maybe UTEP Arizona is worth watching at 11 p.m. on the Pac-12 Network. And, of course, game day will be in Boulder, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. The Buffaloes host the Rams. Not much really cooking here outside of the backyard brawl, that Florida game, and maybe Ole Miss. I want to kind of catch that offense led by Jackson Dartnick. What's cooking here on this night slate for you?
I like the Syracuse-Purdue matchup, kind of an interesting out-of-conference matchup in West Lafayette, Indiana. Syracuse currently favorites, 2.5-point favorites. Syracuse has not really played anyone so far. What can that offense do? How will they look? Can they continue to put up points with a kind of a new-look offense? They replace a lot of different players. They haven't really been tested yet, so interested to see what happens there. I think the Pitt-West Virginia game is very exciting. I certainly think West Virginia could win this game. I think West Virginia has a great opportunity here to get a huge rivalry win at home. It's going to be rocking in that stadium. I mean, I wouldn't want to be playing there as an opposing fan. Green has looked fantastic at quarterback for them so far, 402 and 4 scores. Donaldson has been fantastic. I mean, 31 carries, 137 yards, and a score for him. So I think this West Virginia offense is very underrated. Another game, kind of weird, just want to circle this and highlight. Wyoming travels to Texas. Of course, Wyoming beat Texas Tech earlier in the year, week 1 at home. Texas might have a bit of a letdown performance after such a high win against Alabama. The spread's 28.5. I'd be looking at Wyoming to cover here. I think that's something that's certainly possible. This Wyoming team's a lot better than people give them credit for, and they are 2-0 currently to start the season. That BYU-Arkansas game is interesting. I do like Arkansas to run away with it late. I think Sanders is just an incredible back, and KJ Jefferson's having a really good start to the season. He looks composed in the pocket. I think some SEC teams should be scared of Arkansas coming in the weeks.
Yeah, West Virginia, they're dogs by 1 point. So I think this will be a low-scoring affair. It's going to be very interesting to see how this one plays out. The secondary, I think, is going to have a pretty good year, even though they've kind of struggled so far this season, against Pittsburgh, who was just, again, flat-out awful last week. So overall, not the worst slate ever, but it kind of is. Still plenty to watch here. College football is always great. A couple of upsets potentially on deck. Nick, that's going to be it for today's episode. Overall, final thoughts on the slate with a horrible nightcap.
Pretty poor slate. Week 3 is really disappointing. I was really hoping to see better matchups here. Not really a whole lot going on. Just a very poor slate overall. I believe there are no ranked matchups this week, which is just really upsetting to see. You want to see ranked matchups at this point in the season, certainly. These teams are all kind of playing tune-up games here. We move into week 4, though, which is going to be very exciting. Then we start to kick it off once we get towards the end of September and October. We can really start to have some fun.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.